And good morning. We are live on the Falcons podcast. It is Wednesday morning, a gorgeous Wednesday here in the Southeast. I'm in Atlanta. My name is Scott Kennedy. This guy over here, it's Nick Kendall. He's over in Seattle. So we're coast to coast with your football talk this morning. And Nick, it is schedule release day, though, it seems like a lot of it's been released already with some of the leaks and whatnot. And, we got OTAs going on. It's actually kind of a busy little May we got going on here.
Yeah, we got a lot of microtransactions going on right now, right? Like the not even the 53, the back end of the 53-man roster, but the back end of the 90-man roster things going on. So, guys getting opportunities. Things happen all the time. So you never know if it's going to make a difference or not. So worth talking about. And weather's getting a little nicer. Days are getting longer. I'm getting excited for summer things. Got dreams of some big mountain climbs here once it starts getting nice here. And I guess Denver is going to be out here in Seattle week 1. Again this year. So I don't know if I'll get tickets for that. How expensive NFL tickets are, paying for daycare starting in July. Oh my God, Scott. That probably only do the meet and greet this year with the Broncos fans, but we'll see what that entails. And yeah, getting excited. We got more and more news coming up. Things are ramping up.
Yeah, we should talk meet and greet. We need to do something. This community is getting big enough. We need to do something like that here for sure. But Atlanta is traveling to Denver, and we do a meet and greet with Mile High Huddle. So we'll have to make it a combination. So anybody traveling, any Falcons fans traveling this year, if we do it during that weekend, and we should,
will tell you,
then we'll all get together. We should absolutely do that.
I will say Chad does not want it to be later than week 2, week 3, because in Denver, you never know. And I don't know if you remember last year, we had it because I couldn't go until October 10th, I think. I had just life things going on, and Chad wanted me to go because I missed the last 3. And it was 70 degrees and beautiful, the Green Bay game. The next week, it snowed to 14 inches.
Well, see, Atlanta, we'd be for that, wouldn't we, Falcons fan? We wouldn't mind seeing the snow. Here, it's dry as a bone. August, September. October can be a little iffy, and then November and December, it's just rain.
You say you want the snow until you have to deal with the Denver International Airport.
Yeah. Well, traveling with snow is no fun at all. But what is fun is the community that we have here, and we've got some folks that have come in nice and early, and we go live. And I appreciate the folks that come in after the fact and say hello, or if they're their first time, because they usually watch or listen, because most of our views or downloads are on demand. They're not live, but we still love our community here, our live community. So we want to say hello to some folks that have come in nice and early, like Stone Johnson. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick and the rest of the Falcons family. That's all y'all. Stone, good to see you. George Patterson is here. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Ready for some good Falcons insight. One slot open on the roster for the moment. Will the Falcons add another edge? Thanks. I still think they're looking at corner is one of the top places they're looking, and they're in on Jerry Jacobs from the Detroit Lions, who started 12 games last year, played in 15. Now, in a sense, that's kind of damning with faint praise because the Lions defense was its big Achilles heel. I don't even like saying Achilles right now. I'm going to have to come up with it. That's their big weakness was their secondary. And we talked about, doing mock drafts and stuff or trade prospects. Who would be a good spot for a corner would be Detroit because they needed one. And that's why he's probably still on the open market. But he is a veteran. He's played and he is being courted by the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the Lions were obviously not big fans, let him walk, and they used their first and second round picks this year on cornerbacks in Terry Arnold and Enos Rakestraw. So that was a team that was looking to change that room for sure. They've spent a lot in the trenches, and now they're starting to peel back and go secondary a little bit more. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, valuable snaps. Is he somebody who's going to make the 53-man roster, 55, whatever the heck it is now, Scott? I get 53 so ingrained.
53 plus 1 because you're allowed to flex your quarterback a zillion times, or it's silly.
Yeah.
It's 53 with a 49-man active with a 16-man practice squad, but now you've got unlimited flex. It's 70 guys. It's 70 people on the roster. Yeah. Is what we're talking about now. There will always be maneuvers. There will be 100 different transactions between now and October. So lots of stuff going on. Silas Draven, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick and everyone in the chat. That's all y'all. He's got the coffee emoji. I'll drink to that. He says, I'm really looking forward to our D-line with the new additions and rotational players. They should have a huge impact. Now, One of our community members, Keith Adams, he wanted me to talk a little bit about JD Bertrand. And I don't know him as much as a prospect, but I just try and think of how he fits in the team and all this type of stuff. And he's an inside linebacker, Notre Dame. Nick, when we're talking about all of these big boys, we've talked about the Atlanta Falcons being pretty good in the linebacker room with Caden Ellis, with Troy Anderson, with Nate Landman, and then they go and draft another linebacker. You can't tell me that some of this isn't to put a big defensive line in there and then to move Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis around, edge, mug, all those, fun words we like to talk about, that Bertrand could have a spot in here as next to Landman in packages because they really want to use Ellis, a big front, and they want to use Ellis and Anderson as wild cards. That's the feeling I get when I look at the personnel on this team. Considering what Silas Straven says, when you go about 8 deep on guys that are 285 plus.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of where the NFL's at right now. We have a big impact thanks to, honestly, I'll give credit to Mike McDonald. It goes back further than that, but he kind of really popularized it again in the NFL with the Ravens coming from Michigan. Now he's out in Seattle, but simulating pressure, it's creating matchups up front where you're getting one-on-ones or free rushers completely for guys by only sending 4. A lot of times, it used to be, okay, we want to get one-on-ones. We have to send 6. We have to send 7. No, we're showing a bunch of guys and they're dropping. We have a bunch more hybrid players on the front. And that's what you're kind of getting with Ellis and Anderson. Athleticism doesn't always play at the off-ball linebacker spot in terms of the great play there. The sideline to sideline, the tackling ability, the run fits. A lot of that is, neck up for those type of positions and skills. But athleticism really tends to translate as pass rush for those guys. And you got Ellis, you got Anderson. We'll see what Lake and Morris do as far as simulated pressures. I don't know where the Rams stacked up last year with that. Now, granted, they had Aaron Donald, so maybe that changes the formula a little bit when you have somebody like that.
And then they had 2 rookies that came in and hit big.
Yes, Kobe Turner and Byron Young. One of 2 Byron Youngs in that draft class. Still crazy. But, yeah, good man, Rams. Heck of a draft class. They've done a really good job. They've made their first-round pick in, eons this year, so we'll see what happens with them.
Their draft class last year was insane. I mean, it really was. I mean, if you want to talk about why do we like draft picks, because the more you have a chance of hitting.
Dice rolls.
Yeah, you've got a probability of failure on every pick. So the more picks you have, the more increased probability you have of hitting. Well, they had Stetson Bennett was a 4th-round pick, okay? Including Stetson Bennett, I'm just going to start after Stetson Bennett. So starting in the 5th, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They had 10 more day 3 picks. All of those guys played at least 6 games.
That's wild.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7 of them played at least 10, and one of them was Puka Nacua. And then they hit on Byron Young and Colby Turner. This could be one of the best drafts of all time when you start talking about, when was their first pick? They hit on Steve. Their first pick was 36 overall.
Steve Avila.
And he's really good. I mean, it literally for pound, it could be one of the best picks of all time. I mean, Tom Brady in the 6th round is going to trump just about everything.
Yeah.
But man, for what they were able to do to restock their roster, it's one of the best drafts I've ever seen.
Got to give credit to Sean McVay and that coaching staff for elevating people. Hopefully that can trickle down to the Falcons now, and also have to give credit to Les Snead. And also, I mean, gosh, I know the Falcons show, but talk about a win-win trade. The Stafford for Goff. I mean, everybody, tell me tanking doesn't work, Scott, when you have what the Texans did and the Lions did. Talk turnarounds for teams that have just been dumpster fires because they get super high premium draft picks and hit. And also you got Stafford, getting out of that Detroit shadow. And you and I mean, that was something we hit on right away, Scott. We're like, I like Stafford. No, I love Stafford. Okay. We see it the same. So that's good to see both.
Let's tie it into the Falcons show because you had Zach Robinson there as a coach. You had Raheem Morris as a defensive, as the defensive coordinator. And of those draft picks, you're talking edge, defensive tackle. That was 3rd-round picks. Starting in the 5th, you go edge, cornerback, defensive end, safety, defensive tackle, all in the 5th round or later. If you can hit on half of those guys, if you can get Braylon Trice, if you can get Zion Logue to come in, and if they're trading up and they're able and they believe that much in Arohoro and he can hit, then it's going to be. But yes, hopefully you have same of the Rams magic that they had last year in this draft coming up for sure. Coach coming in, appreciate the super chat, Coach. He says, "Morning, fam. Y'all are amazing humans." I just strive to be an adequate human day to day. It's tough, Coach. I promise you. And this is maybe the one place I'm positive one of my children won't see it, but I'm going through that. Is this child of mine ever going to amount to anything? Struggle right now. And I'm like, this child of mine is in middle school. They're supposed to be butthead lazy. So I'm like, I'm failing as a parent. They have no care whatsoever if they fail this class or not. And I'm like, I need to, who do I talk to with this? I'm like, I'll shoot that out to my podcast fam. Can't be alone. Everybody has to feel that. I just don't talk with enough other parents is the problem, Nick.
I'm not there yet. Yeah.
Yeah. It's teenagers is fun. Yeah. I mean, it's still great, but there's times where you're just like, I'm failing as a parent. I'm a bad dad. My kids don't want to do anything. I'm like, yeah, that's normal, Scott. That's all of them. Okay, good. Now I feel better. Roger Cook coming in across the pond. He says, "Afternoon, everyone." Michael Ranquillo, great to see the sunrise. He says, "Good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. Appreciate you being here." Stephen B with a transition here for us. He says, the idea of signing Van Jefferson. Now, unless this has changed, because y'all may have seen something that I haven't. I'm not going to claim to be, omniscient about football transactions. But he was one of the 4 guys that signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's a decent transition for us because Zach Klein of WSB put out on Twix last night that multiple sources are telling him that the Falcons are opening up with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Arthur Smith and Cordero Patterson and Scotty Miller and Van Jefferson and Parker. Did Parker Hesse just signed with someone else? But there was Michael Pruitt was the tight end. Michael Pruitt was the 4th one. And so again, the NFL loves their storylines, Nick. There were multiple to choose from with the Pittsburgh Steelers, with Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson, with the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields. Arthur Smith and the Atlanta Falcons seems to have won out.
Yeah. I mean, those are his guys. We'll see what happens here. That'll be a fun storyline for sure. I was kind of hoping for that, week 1 with Denver. It sounds like they're going to be out here in Seattle, though. And yeah, it should be an interesting one. I really don't know what to make of the Steelers this year with Russell Wilson. I mean, they were able to make the playoffs last year with Kenny Pickett starting a lot of games in a really tough AFC North. So I guess they're formidable. I mean, as long as Mike Tomlin's there, they're going to be formidable. But I just feel like they're so capped on the offense. The defense is getting a lot older. And week 1 for a new quarterback who's coming off a poor season, who I think was elevated a lot in Denver by the scheme. I mean, we're on Russell Wilson. We've been on Russell Wilson watch for a bit. Now, maybe I'm a bitter Bronco watcher, thinking, he's definitely over the hill and pretty much done, but we'll see what happens with him in Pittsburgh.
I just think he's better than Kenny Pickett, period. Flat out. Kenny Pickett, the Steelers' passing attack, I think, will improve just through osmosis. Now, we can talk about Arthur Smith, this, and this. The Steelers on offense last year were unbelievably bad. I mean, the Falcons were frustrating. They were kind of box to box. They'd move the ball inside the 20s and then turn the ball over, or get inside their own 20 and turn the ball over. I mean, like, when Desmond Ridder had turnovers, by God, he made them count. They weren't just, end of half, throw the ball downfield, see if you can get something. I mean, they were going into the end zone. They were in your own end zone. He got his money's worth, man, when he turned the ball over. So they were still lots better than the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons were. And the Steelers overall were a good team. Now, the scary thing on this, Nick, venture a guess. They've played 18 times. Venture a guess at the record of the Atlanta Falcons versus the Pittsburgh Steelers in 18 meetings.
Gosh, I guess like 13-5 Steelers, but that's just because
it's 2-15-1. It's a drubbing.
Yeah.
It's a drubbing. And this is such a transplant city. There are a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans in Atlanta. And when they come to town, it feels a little bit like a home game for them. So I think that will be different week one. The Atlanta Falcons fans will show up. They've got hope. We're excited down here in Atlanta. We're excited to see Kirk Cousins, what he can do with Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson and Drake London, Raheem Morris, a new coach, all those things. And it should be packed with mostly Falcons fans, at least the first few weeks. And as they keep winning, hopefully it keeps going that way. But there will be a lot of terrible towels. There always are when Pittsburgh visits this transplant wonderful city of ours here in Atlanta. Edward Brown comes in with a super chat. Thank you, sir. He says the toughest home game will be the Kansas City Chiefs. Toughest road game will be the Philadelphia Eagles. I can live with that one. Hopefully you get the Eagles on a downslide where they're losing 5 in a row and not when they're in their peak. When they were at their peak, I thought they were Super Bowl favorites last year. I thought they were the best team in the league for a little bit last year, Nick.
Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule right now. Do you guys play I'm looking for Philly. Maybe. They're not showing up on the Athletic, but I'm sure they're on there. But yeah, no, those are 2 tough teams. For sure. Kansas City on the road is insane. And we'll see what happens. Oh, there it is. Okay, the Athletic was missing Philly. There we go. So yeah, the Eagles will be tough. I mean, am I crazy to say your toughest road game will be New Orleans just because that's throughout the records? You just have a hard time with New Orleans in general? Or is that
you're talking away is the 3 in division, at Broncos, at Raiders, at Eagles, at Commanders, at Vikings. Freaking Falcons can't beat the Commanders. It's mind-boggling. The Commanders have been garbage. The Falcons haven't been great, but they've been better than the Commanders. Can't beat Washington. They've lost, I think, 3 straight to the Washington Commanders. And it's including Taylor Heinicke coming in and looking like vintage Steve Young in the Dome. So Commanders. Minnesota Vikings could be interesting. I'm surprised that one wasn't picked up a little earlier if it was the Steelers. There's lots of storylines. But the best team going in, if we look at who the teams are as far as power rankings and the preseason of the away teams, the Eagles are going to be the highest, and playing in Philly is not easy. Yeah. And because of the rivalry, Nick, you never know what's going to happen with the Saints. So home and away doesn't really matter to me as much in those games. I mean, you'd still rather have the home field advantage, but weird things happen. The voodoo happens when New Orleans and Atlanta play, and they're likely to beat each other like Auburn and Georgia did for like 8 straight years where the away team won. That's how I kind of feel about the Saints. And I kind of peg Saints in Atlanta for most years as a split, but I don't know who, and I'll pick the home team, but you don't know who's going to win where on that one.
Yeah, Saints are a weird team too this year. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of fan fervor for them. I mean, it's like, oh, here we go, Derek Carr again, dead man walking smell on the coach. We'll see what happens with them, but just feels like every time you go to New Orleans, crazy things happen. It's a tough place to play if you are an NFC South member.
Keith Brugman talking about LA says not bad drafting for a team that said F them picks. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
If I was them, I'd trade here. You want my first? Give me all your day 3 picks, for the next 2 years. You can have my first. I'll take these 6 picks, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll take these 8 picks. And honestly, Nick, you give me 8 day 3 picks and you take a 1, my odds are probably that I'll get one of those players will be better than the one you take if I can pick my 8.
It depends where that 1 is.
I know. Yeah. If you're winning, it's in the back half. It's a 20.
Yeah. Yep.
But sure. Again, that goes down to the probability on this. We can talk about, I like this pick, I don't like this pick, but you'll never hear me say, out of all the hand wringing and teeth gnashing, you never once heard me say that Michael Penix was a reach, or this guy can't play, or he's going to be a bust. Not once, because as soon as you say stuff like that, time will make you look out to be an idiot. Mm-hmm. What I've criticized and what I've talked about is needs, team fits, et cetera, allocation of resources. Did you need an inside linebacker with JD Bertrand? Well, I've kind of talked myself into this getting ready for this show. Your linebacker room looks pretty good. However, your edge room doesn't. Yeah, but now my defensive line looks freaking great. Okay, so I play with less edges. I've got 2 hybrid inside linebackers that can play all over the place. And I drafted a guy I can play strictly inside. Okay, that's starting to make sense now. What can I do to not fix this team, but to take advantage of the players to best allocate the resources I have? Mm-hmm. So Keith and Ellen Johnson, he's in here with some stars. He says, good morning, guys. Excited for football again. And they're out there throwing the ball around a little bit. Jay Gribben, another Pope alumni. There's probably more than one of you out there. Jay and I were at Pope together back in the day. He says, good morning, y'all. Good morning to you as well. And Keith, thanks for the stars. John Robert says, glad Kyle Pitts is healthy. And speaking of which, want to talk a little bit about Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was on the podium yesterday. I'm going to lead with this one, and then we'll talk with some other things, because he was asked flat out. The new guy doesn't get the benefit of the easy questions. He got some harder ones. He was asked flat out, if you knew the Atlanta Falcons were drafting a quarterback at number 8, would you have signed with the Atlanta Falcons? And this is what he had to say.
I don't really deal in hypotheticals. We could go down that path for a long time in a lot of ways. It just doesn't do us any good. So, I'm excited for this opportunity to have. I think it's a real privilege to be a quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm trying to make good on the opportunity they've given me with the way I work each day and the way we play this fall.
Now, I titled that, when I cut that up and put it up, I titled that he dodges the question, because technically he did. He did dodge the question, and that's good for engagement, et cetera, et cetera. But he kind of dodged that one, Nick, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Kirk Cousins is not a dumb man, and he gave the ultimate politically correct answer. So what's he supposed to say there, right? I mean, it would cause issues for sure if he was like, oh, yeah, I'm pissed. You couldn't have done that. I would have been back in Minnesota. There was nothing. What do you expect him to say? So that's
there's
a bunch
absolutely
of
no way he could have said, no, I wouldn't have signed here. No way, no how, no way, no how.
Nope.
And, I think the answer was genuine, honestly. Would I have done this? I don't know. I don't want to get into that. Basically, what he said is, no matter how I answer this, I can only get in trouble. So I'm not going to. I can only cause problems if I answer this. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy for the opportunity, and I'm here to work. And that's smart. It's not his first go round with the media on this. Some of the other things he talked about, he got into the tampering charges, and he says the media got into the tampering. The room got into the tampering charges, and he basically said, hey, listen, the league's still handling that. I'm not going to talk about it. Came up again a little bit later. He says, if I said anything during the press conference, it was completely innocent. That's how I saw it. That's why I didn't think it was any big deal. So that's obviously what, they are looking into. I don't think the Falcons are going to come out of this unscathed. He basically said, there's not much to that, but I don't think the Falcons are coming out of this unscathed.
Yeah, they're going to get something taken away. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a first-round pick, but there'll be some sort of draft capital taken away from the Falcons. I don't know when we'll hear about it. Hopefully it'll be sooner than later, just so we can know and put it behind us. There's no sense in dragging the feet here, in my opinion, at this point. But we'll see what happens with the Falcons' punishment from the NFL for tampering, even though I still think it's so dumb, Scott. It's just... You're going to have to take away everybody's picks, because all these people are talking when they're high profile.
And the Minnesota fans that came in when we had that discussion, and there was one I had to ban because he was being an ass, and the other I had a good conversation with was, you're not allowed to do this. I'm like, well, the tampering rules, who they really benefit the most are the agents, because I can do all of this stuff through a go-between. Now, I don't want the head coach calling my running back the day before, so I understand it to a certain extent, some of this, but it's the off season. I'm negotiating contracts, I don't want, so I understand, but I can do all of these things. He's like, well, is it an unfair advantage for the Falcons to have the medical reports, for Kirk to give the medical reports to the Falcons, while they're looking? I'm like, Yeah, but he can give them to his agent, and the agent can give to them. So what's the difference? I tell people all the time, I'm not a trip guy. I'm a destination guy. I don't care if Nick, if we're working together, I'm not going to tell you, hey, this is how I want this done. I'm going to tell you what I want done. Now, your process might be different. At the end of the day, you're coming up with Kirk Cousins getting a 4-year, $180 million contract with 100 guaranteed, and it was agreed to the second legal tampering opens up. So they've been doing all of this stuff, and he wasn't alone. They all do that.
I mean, are we going to have to take away draft picks for every single contract that's announced an hour within the legal tampering period
open? You can do it with the agent. You just can't talk. Okay, well, that's semantics.
Yeah.
That's semantics on that. So again, I agree with you on that. I use a story and hopefully it gets back to him and doesn't get too mad. When Kirby Smart was a position coach, he got taken off the road for 2 weeks because he had his phone with him, and he, a recruit emailed him, and he responded on email instead of text or vice versa. I don't even know because it doesn't matter. He was allowed to do one, but not the other. You're allowed to text him, or you're allowed to email him, but you're not allowed to text him, or you're not allowed to email him, but you're allowed to do one or the other. And he got taken off the road for 2 weeks. I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, you got guys getting hundreds of thousands of dollars under the table, and you're going to take them off the road that's semantics. It's stupid. Yep. So again, off the soapbox on that. We've hit on that a zillion times, but I don't think the Falcons come away unscathed on this. Kirk also hit on his health. He says he's feeling really good. He says he is doing all of the things right now that he would normally do. So he's not being held back. A consummate professional. He's going back and watching. I almost think of it like a batter up there watching my swing. He's like, okay, am I planning and driving with my back foot enough? And he's checking to see, that type of things and the mental hurdles, et cetera, et cetera. But I think all things look good for Kirk Cousins to full go during summer workouts and for week 1. And that's good news for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah. Hopefully he can get out there even sooner than that because, implementing a new offense, new chemistry with receivers, maybe it's something that's going to take a couple weeks to get it going still, considering he's going to miss time. But the fact that he's on the road to recovery is great and going to be out there throwing and coming off the 2 best seasons of his entire career, statistically now, having Kevin O'Connell, who's done good things, and Justin Jefferson and a pretty good Vikings system helps that as well. But I think with where NFL defenses are at right now and how Cousins' style of play is, as long as he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be as good as he's been. He's never been an overwhelming arm talent or athleticism guy. It's been the smarts, and now that there's area to work over the middle of the field, he can take advantage of that. So excited to see what he can do in this offense. And man, it is going to be like going from, just crusty day past due bread to I don't know,
nature's own honey loaf with fresh. Yeah, it's the skill guys, Nick, are going to be happy.
Yeah. I mean, you had the worst quarterback room in football last season, and you won't have the best this year because only one guy plays, right? And it's going to have to be the top. But going from 32nd to, let's call it low. Let's call it low at 16th. An unbelievable jump for everybody, and the quality of football for the fans to watch as well.
After Aaron Rodgers went down, I think the Jets had the worst room. after the first series, I think the Jets had the worst room. Zach Wilson's, no offense, Broncos fans, I haven't hidden this. Zach Wilson was atrocious in New York. Desmond Ridder was a better quarterback in his first 2 seasons than Zach Wilson was. Keith says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Talking about scheduling. He says, what level of importance do you put on a bye week when it's put on the schedule? It's such a brutal game to get the guys rested and healthy. I like to see it kind of mid-season when they need it. And sometimes you see it, it's like, oh, it's week 15. Like, man, some of these guys are so beat up by then. As far as coming off the bye, I'm sure there's analytics and stats out there, but I just feel like there's not a huge variation in a team's win-loss record coming off a bye or not, because if you're playing really well, you don't want to bye. It could actually ruin your rhythm a little bit. But for getting players healthy for the long run, Keith, but as far as the week after goes, I don't put a lot of stock in it. When was the bye last week? Let me look at the schedule while you're weighing in on this, Nick.
I don't mind if it's mid-season or later in the season. What really stinks is when it's like week 5 and you have
Yes.
to have like you should be as healthy as you are all season besides like, the first couple games. And then you have it. It's like, well, now we have a freaking gauntlet ahead of us after that. So if you can have it week 8 through week 13, that's great. Anything like week 5, 6, 7, that always makes me upset. And also just wanted to step on my soapbox for a second. It's time for 2 buys. Rosters are so big. They're talking about adding another regular season game. They need to have 2 bye weeks. There's enough football out there, Scott. I know that sometimes when they really pack some of those bye weeks together, some of the matchups aren't as good, and NFL wants to be king. But I don't know. Speaking as somebody who enjoys the game and wants the players to be empowered, let's protect these guys. Let's get 2 bye weeks out there.
Let's compromise. Let's go to 18 games, ditch the preseason, and go to 2 buys. Yep. That doesn't change the timing of the season at all, because you're playing. Used to be 4. Is it 3 preseason games now? It's 3 preseason games. Used to be 4.
Yep.
So they're talking about
the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah, they're talking about ditching the preseason anyway. So I'm with you. A couple of bye weeks in there is good. And I don't know how I could have forgotten, because as soon as I saw it, it reminded me completely. The bye week last year came week 11 for the Atlanta Falcons after they had just dropped their 3rd game in a row at Arizona Cardinals, because all of us were on here saying Arthur Smith should be fired right now. Leave him in Phoenix. You've got a bye week. Figure it out. Figure out what you want to do for the rest of the season. He should have been left in Phoenix after that game, because that was a stretch of 3 in a row where they lost to Will Levis making his first start. And this is coming off a win at Tampa Bay, one of their best wins of the season. Will Levis making his first start, and he had an historically good start, and they lost that one at Tennessee. Then they lost to, I don't even remember, is it Harold? What's the kid's name that was drafted and played for the Minnesota Vikings and got hurt in his first start against the Falcons, and they bring in Josh Dobbs.
It was Jaron Hall.
Jaron Hall. That's where I get Gerald out of that. Jaron Hall. And then at Arizona Cardinals, another bottom 5 team with Kyler Murray making his first start in over a year, and you lose all 3 of those. So yes, I remember the bye week. The Falcons needed that bye week. It was a good reset, because then they came out and won, their next 2 before losing to Tampa Bay and then losing at Carolina Panthers. Was that the butt fumble game? No, that was 2 years ago at Carolina with not butt fumble, but remember the Marcus Mariota, the one that turned into a meme where he's throwing from his back.
Thursday Night Football against Carolina. Yep, in the rain.
Losing at Carolina. How many games did Carolina win last year?
1 or 2.
And one of them was Atlanta. Was again, and that came up during Arthur Blank talking about it wasn't just the 7-10, it was how you went 7-10. Losing to Carolina. Where's some of these teams? Talking about losing to Carolina, losing to the Commanders. There's the number 2 pick. Losing to Carolina, that was the number 1 pick. Losing to Arizona, that was the 4th pick. Beat the Jets. You remember that one, 13-8, and everybody talking. Remember some of the apologists talking about how the weather was bad and it was really a great win. Guys, come on. That was one of the worst games of football I ever saw. Now, a win's a win if you can get the dub, but the problem was that was a bigger indicator about the rest of your season, not just a blip where you won ugly.
I mean, Scott, all I know is winning ugly. Unfortunately, the butt of all jokes has been the Iowa offense the last 2 years, right? So, any win is a good win, but at the same time, you can make bigger sweeping assumptions about a team based on matchups like that, especially when there's enough of them stacked together.
So you hit the question real quick while I'm looking up some salary cap information for the next question I want to get to.
Sure. John Paddock came in.
What's the question for our listeners after the fact? Because people listen, they don't know what the question is.
Okay, J.M. Gribben comes in and says, "Does John Paddock make the roster if the Falcons trade Taylor Heinicke?" I think Paddock's got a chance to make the roster regardless of Heinicke being traded or anything, because of that +1 that you get there. So making the practice squad. Paddock came in towards the end of the season for the Fighting Illini, And man, he took off. He actually had not a great Illinois team on the road at Iowa, pretty close to a win there. And the week before that, I can't remember who he played exactly, but he put up something like 500 yards, something absolutely crazy for them. Transfer from Ball State, had a pretty good year when he did take the field for Illinois. A little smaller, only 5'11" quarterback, but what was the game against Indiana? Yeah, nuts. 507 yards. Now, granted, Indiana was not very good, but that's still incredible. And then against Northwestern, who had a pretty turnaround season last year, 334 yards. So Penix can sling it around a little bit. Definitely a guy that you like to have in there as a third quarterback option. And given the flex rules with quarterbacks these days, somebody that you can maybe count on as a game day, flex up option because he doesn't count for the 46 or whatever the number is.
Yeah, practice squad feels like a probability no matter what. He started asking the question with Heinicke on they gave him some guaranteed money, but it really only increased his cap number by $1 million. Okay. What I mean by that is if you had cut him, I think you would have saved $7 million. And by restructuring it changed it so that if you cut him, you get $6 million back. So you've already gotten that savings back. So basically it was a $1 million investment. And they could trade him. Is a 6th round pick worth $1 million, Nick? Probably. If you can get a 5th round, is that worth $1 million? Maybe, because that's what they ended up doing. Because you're asking yourself, of all of the things, this one kind of gets swept under the rug. I'm like, you're spending $100 million on Kirk Cousins. You're using a number 8 overall pick, and you're guaranteeing more money to Taylor Heinicke. Guys, what are you doing? This is kind of an overcorrection at the quarterback position, isn't it? One of these guys has to go. But if that extra $1 million buys you a draft pick, okay, that makes sense to me. I just don't know that you can get a draft pick for him in a trade. But the moves that they're making, Jay and Falcons fans, by putting a claim in on Nathan Rourke, who's a career third stringer, by bringing in a UDFA, I think, and I've put it in writing at allfalcons.com, I think Taylor Heinicke's days are numbered. He doesn't want to be at number 3. And if he's the backup and Penix is sitting for here, I don't want him taking reps away from Michael Penix ever. Not one rep. Any rep that's not going to Kirk Cousins, I want to go into Michael Penix, not Taylor Heinicke. So Taylor Heinicke needs a new start somewhere else.
Yep. Probably it's worth just I don't know about the savings or anything, but probably just worth the roster spot at this point. The one caveat there is Cousins' injury history, or not injury history, but coming off the injury, maybe you need arms for the reps, but it doesn't have to be Heinicke for that. You can do Paddock, you can do Rourke, anybody like that makes sense in that role.
The Trevor Simpson saying Kirk said what he said was innocent, i.e. not tampering. Yeah, he said if what he said was done out of innocence. I've got it right here. I got the video file cut up. This is what he said. Once my hard drive spins up, I've got it on an external, and it takes a second. Sometimes it goes to sleep. And
they're the league's still kind of going through that, so I'll let them do it. But there's not a whole lot there. The league's kind of still working their way through it, so I'll let that play its course before I, say anything out of turn. But if I said anything at the press conference, it's because it was so innocent. The innocence is why so that's that.
That doesn't mean it's not tampering. Is the thing. If I said anything at the press conference, it was because it was so innocent. Another word for that is ignorant. I did it. I didn't do it maliciously. I had no idea that this was even tampering. Doesn't matter. Officer, I didn't see the stop sign. It doesn't matter. Lack of knowledge of the law is no excuse when you break a rule. That's why if this was considered tampering, whether he knew it to be tampering or not, whether he considered it tampering or not is irrelevant. And the Falcons will face some ramifications for it. I think that's pretty much a given on this. And And Stephen B says that cup of coffee must last a month at the pace Scott drinks it. And Stephen, yes, I drink my coffee. And one of the reasons I drink it now is I have it. My throat starts to scratch really bad. So after I go on a monologue for like 60 seconds, I have to take a drink. Basically, this is the only time I talk. It's with y'all. Everything else I'm typing along, and family doesn't talk to me. So, I talk mostly here. This is where I do a lot of my talking. So I don't have, a great trained singer's voice or anything like that. And Roy says he's dragging his feet, can't even get to my coffee. Roy, you're doing better than the rest of us. Roy's been going through some, I think he's finished up. Roy, I hope you don't mind. I've seen you put some of the stuff in here, but Roy's going through his last cancer treatment and is hopefully back at work in a week after a pretty rough bout. You're kicking ass, Roy, is what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thinking of you, Roy, that's no fun, for sure. I'm glad to see that. I mean, feeling good enough to be in here hanging. And he said it was yesterday as well. So, hey, it's in the rearview mirror, man. That's great. Good to hear that. Rusty Moore says, what's up, brothers? What's good in the hood? We're just chilling, hanging out, talking football, enjoying our Wednesday morning. JB says he wants at least 2 preseason games. I like them as well. But Scott, one reason I like them is because otherwise, how am I going to be able to evaluate some of the back end of the roster guys? Like selfishly, people are asking me like, what about this undrafted free agent quarterback from Colorado School of Mines? I didn't watch Colorado School of Mines. I mean, God bless you. But if he's out there and there's reps in preseason that I have access to, I'll evaluate those. But other than that, only so many hours in the day. The level of competition, it's kind of like watching, Derrick Henry play high school football. It's like, yeah, that guy's better than everybody. What does it mean for the NFL level? I don't know. The standardization of the talent is impossible for me to evaluate, other than I can say that he doesn't belong at this level.
The problem, though, Nick?
What?
They charge you full price for those 2 preseason games when they were home. When they do 4, 2 away, 2 home, you'd get a 10 game package when you were doing season tickets. You had to pay for 10 home games, and you got full price on preseason games.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I mean, they do because they do it because they can, but no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. That's what the preseason is for, which is kind of fun for if you're in this podcast, you're a football junkie. I always said that, trying to describe to people what I did with recruiting and stuff. I'm like, I cater to the lunatic fringe of college football fans. And I can say that because I'm the head lunatic. If you're watching a Falcons podcast in May, you're interested in second and third string guys and when they want to come in. So I'm interested in that too, but that's what they've turned into. You don't see the starters hardly at all, which can be a grave mistake, in my opinion, if you've got a quarterback that desperately needs reps. Desmond Ridder, who desperately needs reps, get him some and, get an idea of what you've got. So I'm okay with that too, JB, but they're talking about getting rid of the preseason games and they go to 18 games with two buys. That's a pretty good reason. So instead of 2 preseason games, you get an extra regular season game. Well, now 2, because it was 16 games, 4 years ago? So now those 2 preseason games are regular season games. Pamela Johnson says, good morning, Scott and Nick, and everyone in the chat. That's all, y'all. Mark Schrader, good to see you over in Texas. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. And Michael Tran says, how does wide receiver Casey Washington look? Will he make the 53-man roster and be wide receiver 3? I don't know how he looks at OTAs. They're running around in shorts, and there's not a lot going on right now, but most draft picks make the team. Most draft picks make the 53.
Mm-hmm. As far as the third wide receiver, I mean, you paid Mooney, you traded for Rondale Moore. I know that they're a little bit more gadgety, but with how I imagine the target distribution to go, Pitts is your essentially your wide receiver too. Bijan Robinson's going to factor into that as well. So do you need a prototypical wide receiver 2 body type player to fit that role as your second wide receiver? I don't think so with those other 2 guys in there at those spots. So I guess he could be the wide receiver 3, but I would bet on Mooney and Moore to get more snaps, usage, yards, whatever metric you want to use, barring injury.
Look at special teams. That was one of the reasons he was drafted. It was because he hasn't played a lot, but they like his profile on that. So I don't expect him to see a ton this year. I think your three main weapons, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and then again, as Nick said, one of the who steps up between Rondale Moore and Darnell Mooney, then the running backs. The running backs are in there too. Chris talking about the scheduling. He says, I'm interested in the Falcons having quality depth because it's been missing nearly in the entire history of the franchise, especially when the Smith family owned the team. Looking at depth right now, and there's not a lot of teams don't have depth. They just don't. They're like, well, what if this guy gets hurt? Well, they're screwed. I mean, there are mechanisms in place to spread the talent. It's a league of parity for a reason. I think the Falcons overall they look pretty good. Again, there's not many holes. On offense, look good. You've got depth at quarterback. You got depth at running back. Offensive line is as good as anybody's. Nobody goes too deep on the offensive line for the most part. Pass catcher's solid. Your front seven right now looks really good as far as depth goes. It's the secondary where you're thin. You've got two guys, I think. I'm thinking out of four because if you put Clark Phillips in there, I do really like him. But 2+ players in Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell, and after that, it's a little iffy. The depth isn't quite there in the secondary, despite the fact that you have four secondary coaches on the team, and Fontenot Lake, Raheem Morris, and Jerry Gray. It's a whole team of defensive backs coaches.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out there. I mean, luckily, that's a position that you have a chance to draft a cornerback to or somebody opposite AJ Terrell every season. This year, honestly, at the top was a down year at cornerback. I would say next year, better options at the top. I know everybody's all about, Travis Hunter, two-way player at Colorado, but I think, honestly, from what I've watched so far, Michigan cornerback Will Johnson is probably going to be my number one cornerback next season. He's pretty damn good. So there'll be options next year as well if you need to attack that room. But that could be the Achilles heel this year. You mentioned the coaches, Scott. Hopefully that scheme-wise expertise in that room can help elevate that room and have some guys that are questionable play above their Madden rating. The guys who are 70s, 65s playing like 75s out there for the video game nerds at home.
Real quick, and I'm going to pile this into both of them. Roderick asks, tell me, Scott, I know Clark Phillips has moxie, but is he just too small? No, I don't think so. He's small, but I like him in the nickel area where he can freelance a little bit, where he can read and come off coverages and use his football IQ, which is super high. When we talk about scouting players, I talk about the line graph all the time. Up the y-axis is football acumen. Along the x-axis is physical ability. And the guys that go the highest are the ones that are high and right. They're really good football players. They're really good athletes. The guys that go lower, you're hoping to get, they're pegged on one side. Either they're far right on athleticism or they're high on football acumen. And that's where Clark Phillips is. He's just flat out a football player. And I think you're hoping that he finds his way on the field because he can freelance his way into plays and make reads and play. You call him a nickel, but he could basically be a free safety of sorts too, where he's allowed to freelance some. And where was it? It was just right before that was Keith asked, do you see us going after a corner? Again, they're looking at, I've already forgotten his name, the kid that started for Detroit for 15 games.
Jacobs or something?
Yeah, I was like, I get the John Jerry Jacobs all confused when I'm mixing his name up, but he started 12 games for the Lions last year, played in 15, but again, that's not necessarily, despite how good Detroit was, that's not necessarily a great, what do you call, referral? Jerry Jacobs is his name. So keep an eye on Jerry Jacobs. Is he awesome? No. Is he better than Mike Hughes right now? Maybe. Does he make your team better? Is he an improvement? Then you got to look at him, because it's not just, well, he's not that great. Yeah, but is he better than what you got? And can you afford him? Is he available? If you answer yes to all those questions, then he's somebody you got to take a look at.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to add to the room. I mean, if they're also looking to add more talent, it probably says something about where they see it. But with where Atlanta was at, new defensive coordinator, scheme, everything, they're trying to get their footprint. I mean, we talked about it a few times, Scott. And we like it in theory. It just kind of didn't add up in one offseason. But the free agency should be about the immediacy, and the draft should be about 2 to 3 years down the road. And that's kind of how it played out this year for the Falcons. Does that maximize the Kirk Cousins window that you're now in? Maybe not, but in theory, it should keep the Falcons rolling and raise the floor of the overall team a lot with Penix and these long-term defensive front investments as well. But we'll see, right? Picks are always good in theory until we see them on the field and how they play out. So as you always like to say, Scott, every single team made the best decision ever for their moment. They got the top guy on their board.
Nobody got everybody we wanted. We're really excited about this guy. I'm like, did you watch the press conference after the draft? No, but I know what they said because they all say the same thing. Yep. Put in a lot of work. Really got to see him, like what he saw. The really like the person. Really like the character, the football acumen and IQ, and everybody's hitting home runs in the draft.
If it were that good, the best player would always
AJ Terrell get a contract extension. Yes, he will. I'm just spoken in absolute, which is usually a very bad thing. But where do you think he lands? And remember, there hasn't been a big cornerback contract extension since the salary cap went up $30 million. Am I wrong on that? We've seen some of the wide receivers. We just saw the safety. We just saw Antoine Winfield get $24 million a year across two years guaranteed. But the top corners, are 19, or basically the top 10 corners are 17 plus, 17 to 21. So there's a 4 million thing in there. Is AJ Terrell a top 10 corner, and does he get 18 to 19 range, or does he get better than that?
I think he'll get better than that just because how much the cap exploded this last year. And also, we haven't had cornerbacks paid super high for a couple cycles now. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed got a decent contract last year. He's the 6th highest paid now. Jalen Johnson was this year or last year. L'Jarius, excuse me, I said it's 19.1. But you have,
right. I think it was Jalen Johnson just got a big extension from the Bears. I think he's right on that one.
And I think Sneed was paid after that, but it doesn't matter. Point is, Patrick Surtain's about to get paid. Sauce Gardner's about to get paid.
Sauce is a year behind.
He's still about to get paid, though. I think it's probably going to happen end of year 3, year 4. So we're coming up on.
When are you eligible? I don't even think you're eligible to do that until a certain amount of time goes by.
I think you are allowed to be signed.
I'm not sure. The question is where do you think right now the top corners? Jalen Johnson just got 4 years, 76, with 43 guaranteed. So basically 2 years, 22 guaranteed. Jair Alexander, he signed that one in 2022. What a deal for the Packers. I'm not a fan of Jair Alexander.
He had some good years.
21 million. Where does Terrell fit in? Because I don't think he's got the Q rating that Sauce and Pat Surtain do right now.
I don't either, but I think Sauce and Surtain are going to really reset the market. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be like 26, 27, where the guys have only been paid 21 before. And I expect probably Terrell to fall in somewhere 21, 22.
I think that sounds about right. If you go 4 years, 80 million with 50 guaranteed, that'd basically be a 2-year, $50 million contract with 2 years of club options. That sounds about right.
But we'll see what happens this year. I mean, cornerback's position, he was much better in that heavy cover 2 scheme. Granted, the defensive line should be better this year, but it's possible he gets more in that.
Will they wait? Because he's on a 50-year option. They may not wait. They may give him an extension before the season like they did with Chris Lindstrom last year. You might not wait because then you could always tag him. You could always use a franchise tag if need be. But I think the idea of 4 years, 80, 4 years, 85, 21 a year sounds about right. I think that sounds about right. With 42 guaranteed, you get a 2-year deal on that. So again, what gets reported and what actually is are usually two different things. Take the total, divide it by the years to get the average, and then look and see how much that average fits into the guaranteed money. So 4 years, $180 million with 90 guaranteed. That's a 2-year, $45 million year contract for Kirk Cousins with a $10 million bonus. Yeah. So on that note, we're going to get out of here. Keep those alerts on. We might go Friday. I'm going to see if I can get Daniel Flick on here to go. He was at OTAs this week, and we might go Friday if he's available. I want to get his impressions of the game. We might not, but make sure you get those alerts so that you know if we do go on Friday morning. Otherwise, Nick and I will be back on Monday morning to talk OTAs, roster moves, schedule release, all of those good things. Probably start looking at wins and losses. It's time for predictions. If you want to continue the conversation, hop on over to youtube.com/milehighhuddle. We're going to go talk some Denver Broncos there. And as a reminder, you can still go to lioncoffee.com and use your Go Falcons 20 promo code to get 20% off anything on the store except 100% Kona and Cases. Everything else is good for 20% off through the end of this month. It fuels us in the mornings, and we're big advocates for Lion Coffee. So on that note, Nick, any final thoughts? We're going to bail.
Nope. We'll guys see you over at the Mile High Huddle stuff. Have a great Wednesday. And I always say on the Broncos stuff, but I'll say it here. Choose kindness, compassion. Easy to get, too far down the wormhole here, and make the hard choice and just be compassionate and kind.
Thanks to Edward. Thanks to Coach. Thanks to Keith and Ellen Johnson for the financial support for the show. Keeps the lights on. Keeps my forehead nice and shiny. Y'all have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.